Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with the one and only Larry C. Johnson. Oh my gosh, there's all kind of madness going on. Larry's got a lot of great info at sonar21.com, and we're going to have a discussion. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Larry Johnson. We got a lot going on. Larry's got all kind of, he's got a lot of knowledge about what happens on the inside in Washington D.C. He's still got a lot of friends and low, as the old country song says, low friends in high places. Yeah. But the important thing here, before we get started, is for you to understand something, and that is, you know, a lot of us on the alternative media, you know, people are like, yeah, you guys sure know. I had somebody tell me the other day, yeah, Garland, it seems like you know a lot about foreign policy. And as I think it was Casey Stengel, the famous manager, that said when they told him he was a genius, he said, the Yankees manager that won all the World Series, and they said, you're a genius. He said, you know the definition of a genius? They said, what? He said, taking credit for all the home runs that somebody else hit. Yeah, and that's what a lot of us do here. The Larry Johnsons of the world, the Scott Ritters of the world, the Ray McGoverns that we learned so much, dear brother Ray McGovern. And we go to their websites, we listen to what they have to say, and we learn a lot. And you can do that to a website. This is a point of reference that you absolutely have to go to daily. Sonar21.com site. He has all kinds of, he has guest writers. He writes great stuff himself. And you can subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. And also, guess what? There's a support us button. You got PayPal, PayShoot, Patreon, and Buy Me a Coffee. Don't forget, you know, Scott Ritter and Larry and all the different people who are on here. This stuff comes out of our pockets. Larry's got to pay for that. Larry's got to keep that going. And if you guys don't help him, if you guys don't donate, then it's hard to keep this stuff going. So make sure you go to sonar21.com and make sure you donate. And Larry has a tremendous article, his latest article. Donald Trump has a major problem, political problem over Iran. And here's what's interesting, Larry. And here's what's interesting about that. Political problem, because people are talking about what's going to happen, the bombs are going to drop, these are the people are going to attack, blah blah blah. But there's another angle of it, and I'm glad you're touching on that. Larry, what do you know about the politics of this?
Yeah, so the first hint the other day was seeing Candace Owens come out blasting Donald Trump. I go, whoa, because Candace has been one of the most stalwart voices supporting Trump. And, you know, she's a black female and, you know, does use that part of her persona, but she's also, she's just, you know, she's had a particular message and point of view. So I said, wow, that's something. Then I saw Charlie Kirk, Talking Points USA, posting really stuff that was, you know, was not supporting attacking Iran. And even Jack Posobiec.
Yes.
So right there, you got three people on social media who've been sort of king and queen makers for Trump. Then you had Steve Bannon and Tucker, and then Trump going off on Tucker, you know, calling him a kooky. You know, when you're a 79-year-old guy and you have to start calling people names as opposed to addressing their argument, you know, that you've already lost. So, you know, I'm seeing all that pile up. Then I was invited to speak yesterday to the Manatee County Republican monthly lunch. Mm-hmm. And I talked mostly about gaslighting, how Russiagate, this was a comprehensive smear program put together, not just by Hillary Clinton, but FBI and CIA. They actually started. They started in the summer of 2015, and ultimately to subvert and target Trump. But they were going to subvert and target whoever was going to be an opponent to Hillary. And then I tied that into the war with Ukraine, how that we've been lied to on so many fronts. But then I also touched on this entire potential for war with Iran. And I was really shocked by the number of ardent Trump supporting Republicans in that group that basically expressed to me afterwards, yeah, man, we're really concerned. What is Trump doing? What is Trump doing? And so and then I saw the opinion poll reported by the Federalist. I don't recall who actually did the poll, but the Federalist says, yeah, it's true. 76% of all Americans don't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb. You know what? Iran would 100% agree with that. They don't want a nuclear bomb, or at least, 90% agree. The other part of the poll, though, was 63%, 61% said, we shouldn't be involved with attacking Iran. We shouldn't be in the middle of this. We shouldn't have any military action whatsoever. And that included 53% of Republicans who identified Republicans, independents, Democrats. Trump's got a problem. If he goes through with this, and I agree with you about the lies, because even though they claim, he's going to wait 2 weeks, they could very well launch it tonight, tomorrow night. And when they do, I think the odds are high that we could lose at least one B-2 bomber in the effort. And that Iran's response that we think we can contain, we will not be able to contain. And it will lead to significant destruction of U.S. Military facilities, principally Al Udeid Air Force Base in Qatar, and the shipyard, sort of port that's used in Bahrain. So this, really dangerous times. And, and I interviewed when I was in Moscow last week. A week ago, Tuesday, I interviewed General Evgeny Burzhinsky. He was basically was the head of their equivalent of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So the senior 3-star general. He would, if Hollywood was looking to cast a man as, we need a guy that looks like a Russian general, he'd be it. he fit the role. And he and I were about the same age. He's like 72, 73. I'm 70. So, two old guys sitting around talking. And one of the topics that came up was about, how dangerous is this current situation? And I made reference to the days of, don't know if we want to call them good old days or bad old days of the Cold War. And he said, the closest we ever came to nuclear war was in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And he goes, but where we're at now, he says, I think it's more dangerous. Because, and he was particularly referencing that attack that was carried out on the strategic bomber airfields on June 1st, now, 18 days ago. So, we're in some, very precarious times, and Trump is, candidly, he's acting really strange, very erratic. And, he's like nitroglycerin. You got to be careful how you handle him, because you never know when he's going to go off.
One of the things I think that is bad for Trump out of this, we're just talking politics for a minute, just politics, politically speaking. If you're a leader, you want to be seen as strong. You want to be seen as decisive. You want to be seen as in charge. There's nothing worse than somebody, I don't care what rank you are, if you're a sergeant and your guys under you want to say sergeant, they want to believe that the sergeant's making decisions or that the lieutenant's making decisions. They don't want to see a waffly sergeant, right? Or whatever the case may be. You got to look like you're in charge. And the thing I think that's really damaging to Trump, let's just say we don't attack, whatever. Let's say we get out of this. Long-term damage to Trump. all of this business about he's a puppet for Netanyahu. He's a lackey for Netanyahu. All of these memes going around that have him like as a dog on a leash for Netanyahu. There's one that has the Netanyahu holding a puppet and everything like this. The discussion has decidedly moved away from Donald Trump. And he likes, I'm the tough guy, I'm in charge, I make the deal. It's gone. Yeah. And now the discussion amongst his supporters, a significant portion of his supporters are looking at him saying, you're in charge of nothing. You're a puppet. Once you start losing that aura of strength and being in charge, you're kind of already done. That's bad for Donald Trump.
100% agree. 100% agree.
So let me ask you this. So let's talk about the latest we hear. From what you've heard, we've heard rumors about Tulsi Gabbard. We've heard, what she might or might not have said. We're hearing rumors from Trump will make a decision in days. Trump will make a decision in weeks. What are the kind of rumors are you hearing? And what do you think of, if there's any validity to any of them?
Well, let's deal with what we know factually.
Okay.
What Tulsi presented in March regarding the intelligence community assessment or answering the question, does Iran have a nuclear weapon? The answer is no. Is Iran working on a nuclear weapon right now? The answer, according to the intelligence community, is no. Now, let me explain sort of how that process coming to that judgment works. Even though they keep talking about 17 or 18 intelligence agencies, the fact of the matter is that when you come out with a community judgment like this, it usually reflects the judgment of the agencies that collect information, they collect intelligence information that's then used in that judgment. So that means Central Intelligence Agency, because of human sources that it collects, some SIGINT, but mostly human source, the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and then the fourth is State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research. So when it comes time to write up that judgment, each one of those, at least three other agencies besides CIA, had to sign off and say, yeah, that's what we agree. We agree that that's what all the available information, all of the SIGINT, all of the imagery that's available, all of the diplomatic communication, that everybody is in agreement. We do not think that that Iran currently has a nuclear bomb or is working on one. And that has been the judgment in place since at least, 2007, so 18 years.
Yeah.
So Tulsi was not there giving Tulsi's opinion. She wasn't being the pundit. Hey, I'm Tulsi Gabbard. I'm an attractive, articulate young woman, relatively young, younger than me, that's for sure. and this is my opinion. No. She was given the judgment of the intelligence community. So then Donald Trump goes and shows his ass. He's on board a plane coming back from the G7. And he's asked the question, he says, well, what about, Tulsi Gabbard testified before Congress that Iran doesn't have a nuke. And Trump's remarks, I don't care what she says. I'm not saying he'd be the first president to say that he didn't care or didn't listen to what the CIA or the intelligence community had to say on an issue. But he's the first one I know that was dumb enough to say it in public, because that just, creates enemies for you, especially within the intelligence community. From Tulsi, some like Ray McGovern and others have recommended that she resign in protest. I did see the day after he made that comment, Tulsi came out providing Trump with some cover, saying, well, the statement that I made in March was based upon intelligence we had at the time. And she said something to the effect that it doesn't take into account that there could have been new developments. Now, she was, again, trying to give him an out. But I spoke earlier today with Alistair Crook, and Alistair was of the perspective that he thinks Tulsi ought to stay in, if nothing else, to be a voice of sanity and reason, to speak up. And if they shut her out, they shut her out. But and she documents it all, documents it. We told you. We told you. So when he does it and it goes bad, he can't come back and say, I never knew this could happen. Nobody ever told me. You know, I've seen, I saw that working one of the military exercises I did over the years. And we had this Navy SEAL commander, and arrogant guy. And whenever you do an exercise, a military exercise, you never want to create notional forces. A notional force is an imaginary force. It's like if you're training police on how to do room entry with a hostage situation, you don't suddenly introduce, oh, there are 2 more hostages next door, because then the police involved with that action, they'll go next door. Well, and if you didn't tell the next door neighbors, they'll be upset when the police come marching in. And so this guy wanted to create some notional forces, FBI agents. He wanted to have FBI agents inserted. And he said, hey, don't do it. Like we told him, don't do it. It's going to create problems for you, because the other military units are going to come back and start asking for reports, asking for information, intelligence from those guys. And we don't have anything written to give them. Guy insisted. So did it. Sure enough, man, it blew up. It became a big issue, a problem. These units were demanding this information. The exercise couldn't go forward without it. And the guy said, oh, I didn't realize that this could create a problem. And it was like, you dumbass, we told you repeatedly. And so he looked at me and said, could you write up those messages? Now, I could have. But I said, no, I'm just State Department. That's outside my bounds of competence. I can't do it. I was just going to let him have to hang on his own petard. So that's where I think Trump is at. Trump is at a position where he's ignoring clear advice and warning from the Director of National Intelligence. It's not her opinion. It is the collective judgment of the intelligence community. Now, that doesn't mean the intelligence community is always right. They can be wrong, but prove them wrong with facts. Let's have some actual intelligence. What we do know from an intelligence standpoint is there's only one country between Iran and Israel that signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That'd be Iran. There's only one country between Iran and Israel that allows International Atomic Energy Agency folks to come in and inspect the nuclear facilities. That's Iran. So when you got Bibi Netanyahu sounding like, the boy who cried wolf. Oh, Iran's, they're 2 weeks away. They're 5 weeks away. They're 1 month away. I mean, he's been doing that since, I think the first time was 1984. But we've definitely got him on tape at least 5 or 6 times since 1995, warning that, hey, man, they're a week away. They are a week away. We got to stop them. And it's a lie. It's just a complete, utter, fabricated lie.
Well, see, here's the other part of it, too. And that is, what are the stakes? What are you talking about doing? It's one thing if you're saying, well, if you don't do what I do, I'm going to throw a brick at you. All right, somebody could get hurt if you throw a brick. You're talking about starting a war. You know what I mean? And you're not starting a war. You're talking about joining in a war that, by very definition, is considered the highest crime based on the Nuremberg trials, which is a war of aggression. Right? So a war of aggression has started. An international crime of the highest order has started. And you're saying we're going to join in on the side that's in violation of international law, because even though my own government intelligence says, nah, we can't tell you definitively that they're doing this. Because even now, the IAEA has backtracked And I know why they backtrack. You know why they backtrack, because they're like, oh crap, this is gonna come down on us. We put out a load of crap. The IAEA is now backing off. Oh no, we don't have any evidence. No, we've looked around. Come to think of it, and perhaps in hindsight, we were a little bit hasty. They don't have it. Da, da, da. So the IAEA's backed out on you.
Yeah.
Your own people's backed out on you. And what are you saying? I don't care what the IAEA says. I don't care what my own intelligence says. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to join in a war of aggression that is quite likely to collapse my own economy. And people specifically voted for me and said, hey, man, can you do something about the price of eggs and meat and chicken and the price of gas? And we're sick of all these wars. No problem. I got you. That level of absurdity. It's like, what the hell land or country are we living in? What world are we living in when a politician would do that?
Yeah, no, Trump claims that he wants something negotiated, but he stood by and allowed Israel to attack Iran 2 days before the United States was supposed to meet with the Iranian delegation in Oman to talk about a peace deal, to talk about a deal to end Iran's, I'm not going to call it ending Iran's efforts to get a nuclear weapon, because they're not making any efforts to get a nuclear weapon, but at least create the assurances that Donald Trump and the rest of the West will know that Iran is not involved with getting a nuclear weapon. And Trump could have shut down that Israeli military aid in a heartbeat. But he didn't. He let it go forward. And then we saw the spectacle of him at first taking credit for it. Oh, yeah, man, they did that with our weapons, and Iran's going to find out what a bunch of tough people we are and how great our weapon system is. Then 2 days later, he's going, you remember Sergeant Schultz from Hogan Heroes. I know nothing. I see nothing. I hear nothing. I didn't even get out of bed today. So which is it, Don? You went to the New York Post and said, man, I know everything, man, doing the Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Instead of I've been everywhere, I know everything. He goes from that then to Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. Oh, God, how did this happen? I'm sitting here mentally addled. I have no idea what's going, And then he keeps coming back with unconditional surrender. They got an unconditional surrender, which, okay, you back him into a corner. That's not the art of the deal. It's easy to get deals done when I got a gun to your head, Godfather style. Hey, but put Johnny Fontaine in your new movie, or hey, you can get a bullet in the head. Oh, okay, let me sign him up. That's not negotiation, and that's what Trump's trying to do. So it's that you've seen growing alarm among a significant segment of Trump voters, and I see the comments on my website of and the different videos I've appeared on. There's a lot of people saying, basically, I voted for that SOB and he's now betrayed me.
Yes.
Now, we can't vote for him again because he's ineligible to run, but they're sure as heck not going to vote for Republicans. And bringing that up, did you see Tucker Carlson skin Ted Cruz alive yesterday?
Unbelievable.
I was ready to call the police. Hello, I'm watching a beating. This man's taking a terrible beating. Please come, stop, protect him.
I felt like I was watching Deliverance, and he was Ned Beatty.
Yeah,
and it's like I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, okay, you're a conservative, so a lot of conservatives would say, "I'm a patriot. I'm a patriot." They got a flag. They're going to say, "I'm a patriot. I'm a patriotic American," right? All right, so Ted Cruz, why'd you become Mr. Patriotic American? Love your country, standing up for things. Why'd you join that? So I could defend Israel.
Yeah.
I didn't know he ran for office. And what's happening is people are starting to say, wait a minute. I didn't vote for the president of Israel. I didn't vote for the senator. I didn't know Texas was in Israel. And they're starting to say, I think we've been had. Something's wrong here. So before you know it, you're going to see people running against some of these people saying, hey, I'm for America, not from any other country. They don't mention a country. And there's a lot of voters that are going to say, I'm not, especially the way things are going. You don't let gas go through the roof, which it's already started climbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you've got members of Congress, this other, I forget his name. He's from Florida, but he wears it. He was in the Israeli army.
Fine. Yeah, fine.
No, Larry Fine's a different one, or David Fine. This Brian Mast. That's his name. And Mast actually wore an Israeli uniform onto the floor of the House of Representatives. Now, I've got a CIA buddy who's a dual Irish citizen, but pick your loyalty, man. Figure out which is your country. If your country is Israel, that's fine, but don't sit here and represent Israel in the United States. Go to Israel, represent Israel. Same for Russia, or Germany, or Britain, or Japan, or pick your country. We got a national identity. That's what we're supposed to be protecting and upholding. And so this is what became very, just painfully evident in the course of that entire, hour plus discussion or back and forth, is that Cruz is he's beholden to the Zionist state, and he tried all the tricks that by even raising that as a question, trying to accuse Tucker of being anti-Semitic. And it's just, again, it's how they play the game. But Tucker was entirely correct, and I think you're going to see a growing number of Americans starting to go, you know what? We're sick and tired of being the abused prisoner in the Israeli jail cell.
Well, here's the other part of it too, and I picked this up. So Tucker Carlson was having a good intellectual conversation with him. Hey, what about this? What about that? You're an anti-Semite. Wait a minute. A lot of people are sick of the woke stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the woke stuff. As soon as somebody says, I don't agree with somebody, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, whatever, people are sick of that crap. They don't want to hear it. Right. How are you going to sit around and say, yeah, these Democrats are running around calling everybody a transphobe. I'm sick of that. And as soon as somebody says, I disagree with you politically and I want to have a conversation from it, you do the exact same thing. If I question you, he might as well call him a homophobe and a transphobe as to call him an anti-Semite because of the context in which he used it. It was a defensive attack.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I found shocking, that someone with Cruz's intellect, because he's not an unintelligent man.
Oh.
And he was reputedly one of the best debaters at Harvard, according to Alan Dershowitz. But when he stands up and says, "Hey, the Bible says I've got to support Israel," this appeal to Scripture.
But Iran is a crazy theocratic country. They're a bunch of crazy theocratic the religious fruitcakes. Really, why are you doing what you're doing? Because it says so in the Old Testament.
Yeah, with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about what the real Iran is like. So, I've spoken over the last 3-4 weeks, directly or indirectly, with Pepe Escobar, with Glenn Deason. I think you've been on his show before, perhaps, with Alistair Crook and his wife, Aisling, with Max Blumenthal and his wife. They were all in Iran. And what they reported was, in contrast to the stories that were told of this great oppression of women, women, if they don't have their heads covered, they get beaten with sticks, and none of that was true. In fact, one of the people remarked that they'd be riding the subway and there'd be a young couple on there making out in public, which you'd say, well, that's a conservative Islamic state. How do they, but that was allowed. And what they came back with was and we saw actually the proof of it on June 13th with the Israeli Pearl Harbor attack on Iran. That they are woefully unprepared as intelligent. They don't have a strong counterintelligence operation. They're not running an authoritarian state. There's a lot of freedom and flexibility. That's how that they were able to get in there and exploit that. So we have a cartoon picture of Iran that does not correspond to the reality.
Larry, it seems like, too, to be quite frank, we've got a cartoon picture of military engagement. Here's what I mean. It's like me saying there's some guy in the bar. What are you going to do? I'm going to fight him. What are you going to do? I'm going to go punch him. Then what? Things will work out. He'll probably just go home. Yeah. No, I punch him, and then 3 of his buddies get up and surround me, and he has a baseball bat and all that. Oh, man, I didn't count on that happening. Well, yeah, but I punched him. I can't count on anything. Okay. Yeah. They always have something like this to do. Okay, here's the plan. We're going to put drones here, some car bombs here. We'll blow them all up. We'll knock this out. We'll do a cyber attack. Okay, that's great for the first couple hours. But then what? The other side will just collapse then. No, they're going to get themselves together. They're going to pick themselves off. They're going to dust themselves off. And they're going to start throwing missiles at your ass. And then you're going to have a problem. And that seems to be we'll get them down. Okay, you got in a punch. Dude, a punch ain't going to end the fight. They got up off the ground. They dusted themselves off. And in my opinion, it seems to me that Israel's kind of getting pummeled into submission.
Well, they're being attrited. The attrition process is underway. They're firing air defense missiles that they don't have an unlimited supply of. And their source of getting resupplied is the United States, where we don't have unlimited supplies. Our stores the shelves are empty, basically. So this failure of Israel to anticipate, think through the follow-up steps about conducting this kind of war with a country like Ukraine, or like Iran. So let me do the comparison. Iran, geographically, is 3 times larger than Ukraine. So think how big Ukraine is.
Jeez.
It's 3 times larger. Then the population-wise, it's also 3 times larger than Ukraine. Ukraine's got 28 million, and Iran is sitting there at about 92 million, 93 million. What's my point? Well, we've now got more than 3 years of evidence of Russia attacking Ukraine, artillery, aerial bombardment, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, air-launched missiles. And they've caused massive damage all over Ukraine, but it hasn't forced the Ukrainians to surrender. What I'm suggesting is that Israel does not even have a 10th or a 20th of the capability that Russia does. It doesn't have the ability to deliver the amount of fires, the amount of explosives that Russia has delivered on Ukraine, and yet it thinks it's going to bring Iran to its heels within 24 hours, 48 hours, a week, a month. Ain't going to happen. It's just not, you can, while there are some short players that can get into the NBA, there is a Muggsy Bogues once, about my height. But that just because that you get this exception doesn't mean it's going to be the rule. And the United States and the Israelis have put this way, Israel's never fought a war like this. Israel has never, in its entire 76-year history, 77-year history, it has never fought a war this long with this many casualties and with so little chance of stopping it. And so at some point, they're going to run out of gas, physically and literally. And
Well,
I mean,
and well, I think even more so, they're running out of people because, or the people are running out. Period. They're voting with their feet, as they say. I'll keep throwing these articles from Haaretz where they're saying the Israelis are not allowed to leave. Now they're saying the ones that are wealthier are getting on their yachts, getting the hell out of Dodge, and they ain't coming back. Israel's. I'll put it like this: I think Israel's toast. I don't know how Israel recovers from it when your whole shtick is, hey, Jewish people are safe here. Not like the other part of where there's anti-Semitism. Well, that ain't going to play real well anymore. Nobody's coming there. They're going back to Brooklyn or Paris or wherever the hell they're from, and they ain't coming back. Number one. Number two, I don't want you to think of the amount of dollars it's going to cost to repair the damage that's been done just in 5-6 days.
Yeah.
They can't take 2 or 3 weeks of this. If Iran just keeps throwing a couple in, boom, boom, they're going to run out, and then Iran can just finish them up. Then once you're sitting ducks, they can do whatever they want to you.
Yeah. Every time Iran launches a ballistic missile, and apparently I just saw a report a little bit ago that for the first time they've shot air-launched cruise missiles. That means they had a jet up flying somewhere that launched the missile towards Israel. So they're adding that as a tactic. But every inbound missile from Iran is going to require at least 2 to 10 anti-missile defense systems to fire back. And so when you consider the fact that, let's say a Patriot battery, it's got 16 rocket tubes, and you got 2 incoming ballistic missiles from Iran, and Israel fires off 16, 8 at each of the missiles. Well, Lockheed Martin makes a grand total of 550 of those a year. So right there in one shot, you're already using up, a significant portion of the total annual production. And you're right, it can't sustain it.
And Iran does that 3 or 4 times now a day. They do it in the morning. They're doing it broad daylight now.
That's what they're doing. They're forcing Israel. Okay, we'll just keep tossing these at you, and you have to keep shooting them down. And sometimes they're sending some of their old stuff. And just, I think yesterday was some of the newer missiles that they've got. They're solid fuel. And the beauty of solid fuel means you don't have to be driving around with a gas truck filling you up.
Well, here's the thing, too, and that is, as far as Trump opening a can of worms, apparently, like the guy al-Sistani, who is the highest Shia cleric in all of Shiite Muslim in Shia Islam, is saying, you better be careful about trying to assassinate Khomeini, right? Yeah. And this guy could let's face it, if he does some kind of fatwa or whatever and says all Shia Muslims, wherever you are, we're at war with the U.S., you got a civilizational war, you got big problems. You got the Houthis over there. People forget. Why did the UAE ducked out first? The UAE and Saudis were bombing the Houthis. The UAE got out of there first. And then the Saudis were like, they knocked out like 25% of the Saudis' oil production. And the Saudis were like, we think we'll take a hike on this one. And we moved all our planes to Saudi Arabia. We sure can't land them in Israel because their bases are getting smashed. It wouldn't be really difficult for Iran and its allies and some of its people that aren't allies. The Taliban are saying they may get in Pakistan. It wouldn't be difficult in that region if people in those Islam civilizations said, I think they're coming for us all, which is what Pakistan said.
Yeah.
And say, we got to run the Americans out. And let people get in the 70s. There was an oil embargo. It wouldn't surprise me if they get together and do an oil embargo. Oh, terrible. Nothing good is going to happen. And a lot of really, really bad things are almost guaranteed to happen if we go in. And Trump's done if that happens. Politically, I think he's done if he goes in. I think it's political suicide.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's doing Japanese seppuku. Whoa.
John Belushi, like he used to remember when John Belushi was a samurai dry cleaner.
Yeah. This, unfortunately, this is Trump's George H.W. Bush no new taxes moment. When you run on a campaign to say, hey, we're going to stop spending all of our money on needless foreign wars, and now to, oh my God, we got to spend it, another $1 trillion to stop Iran from attacking us. And I love it when people like Jack Keane and others said, "Oh, they bombed our embassies in Beirut and 1983 and 84, and they blew up the Marine barracks in 1983." Yeah, that's all true. Why? Why was Iran attacking us then? Would it have anything to do with the fact that the United States Navy was offshore shelling with big guns on the battleships, the interior, and killing Shia women and children in villages? That had something to do with it. We were the provocateur. In fact, I heard a story yesterday. I think it was somebody had talked to Cap Weinberger. Oh, it was Doug McGregor, and Doug told a story. He met with Cap Weinberger, the former Secretary of Defense, who was there under Reagan when the whole Marine barracks went up, and Weinberger was the first to learn as Secretary of Defense that Reagan had authorized this detachment of Marines to be put ashore in Beirut. Now, in the preceding months, we had been launching those shells that I talked about in these villages. And when Weinberger found out about it, he went over to the White House and said, "Mr. President, you can't do this. This is going to end badly." And Reagan was, "Well, shucks, I've made my decision." And so he stuck with it until I guess it was in October that the phone rings and Mr. Weinberger, the president, wants to see you ASAP. He gets over to the White House and he says, I shouldn't have listened to George Shultz. Shultz was the one who recommended putting the Marines in. He was a former Marine. He goes, "Cap, you were right. We paid a terrible price for this." Now, Reagan was in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease back then, from people I know that were working with him and briefing him. I'm beginning to think that, possibly Donald Trump could be afflicted with that as well, just because the decision-making has been so erratic and the insults, Trump, the insult dog, has been almost out of control.
The things that he's saying, unconditional surrender 1 minute, and then we might have to kill the guy, the leader of the country, another minute, and then I knew I was behind it, we tricked them and attacked them, blah blah blah, and then like a few hours later, hey, we weren't involved in any way, I didn't know anything about that, and I'm like, did you forget that you just, like yesterday, we're jumping around, high-fiving, and had chest bumping Pete Hegseth because of the great success you've had, and like 24 hours later, you're like, I didn't know anything about it.
Well, and I think you're exactly right that this, although Carolyn Levitt announced today that Trump's not going to do anything for 2 weeks. He's going to wait 2 weeks to see what's what. Well, it reminds me a little bit about Case Blue with the battle that took place that had culminated with the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II, because one of the a German officer, was carrying with him the top secret plans, got shot down, and those plans were recovered. And when they finally made their way to Stalin, he didn't believe it. Oh, it's too good to be true. That can't be true. If he had actually taken the plans, believed that they would have maybe saved 1 million, 2 million Russian lives. So we're being led to believe that Trump's going to wait 2 weeks. And I'm with you. I think that may just be he may be lying. and they're gonna, they'll hit tonight, hit tomorrow night, and say, "Oh, well, I was going to wait 2 weeks, but Iran did X or Iran did Y, and we had to go." So it is a dangerous time, and what's unfortunate is there's genuine questions about Trump's sanity.
Well, your thoughts on this? There was a phone call, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. It's like this, and I've talked about the international laws on perfidy. The crime of perfidy. You can't bring a person in and say, I'm trying to negotiate with you and put up a white flag and all this stuff to get the person to drop their guard so you can attack them. That's against international law.
Right.
Okay. So now that Trump has done that, when Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin had a discussion, I would think they'd have to have that in there somewhere. I would think they would have to say, guys, we're, quote, negotiating with them. We're over here talking about some trade deal, whatever. They want to go negotiate with us about, magnets and rare earth minerals and all manner of stuff like that. But from the looks of things, you can't negotiate with these people because they literally laughed about it. They literally celebrated. They literally look what we did. We were able to bring them into our confidence and get them to drop their guards so we could attack them. Okay, you got away with it. You did it. You can laugh about it. But from then on, there's look at us. Trump says, I'll do this in 2 weeks. And what is the first thing we think? Yeah, he's just trying to get their guard down so they can attack him. Everybody in the world's thinking that about the United States, period, which they probably should have already. But that's a whole nother story. At least Trump's out in the open with it.
Yeah, and hey, the credibility of the United States has just been savaged. Who's going to believe a single thing we say going forward? And Trump can argue, "Oh, well, I'm just creating chaos and uncertainty." Man, the last thing you want when you're dealing with firearms of any size, whether big bombs or little guns, you don't want to be uncertain. You want to know. And in fact, if you suspect or believe that somebody's going to pose a threat to you, then you got to be prepared to take action to defend yourself. And that's where this has gone awry. That the one country that is a flagrant abuser of international law, Israel, the one country that is a bona fide perpetrator of human rights crimes, they're the ones trying to make the case that they're the aggrieved party. They're the ones killing civilians.
Somebody blew up. Did you hear this? Iran blew up one of our hospitals. They've crossed the red line. Israel is saying it's a red line that they literally said only terrorists attack hospitals, which I would argue with that. They're certainly valid, but they at one point in the beginning of the Gaza operation, they blew up a hospital. And then they said, nah, that wasn't us. That was Hamas. We didn't blow up a hospital. We wouldn't do that. That was Hamas that blew up the hospital. And within a couple of weeks, they blew up another one. And then they started saying, everybody get out of the hospitals. We're going to blow it up. And then they blew up the hospitals. Then they just went in and shot everybody in the hospitals. But the first one, we're supposed to believe they didn't do. And as soon as their hospital windows get blown out, oh my God, they're blowing up hospitals. What a terror. It's a crime against God and nature. And you're like, really?
Yeah, good. I had, in fact, this one Zionist I know sent me a note. So you must be real proud of your buddies blowing up a hospital, but their missiles aren't very good because they only did minor damage. Well, let's start. First of all, I don't want to hear a damn word from you after Israel, the Zionists have blown up at least 9, if not 10 hospitals. They've almost eliminated any kind of medical care, not to mention the number of aid workers and rescue workers that have been killed.
Members of the press targeted.
Yeah. So I don't want to hear it from you. But it is the hypocrisy on it really is profound. But Israel is finding out. It's now like Ukraine has done. Israel is in a war of attrition. now with Iran, but also with Hamas. And it can't win. It does not have the power or wherewithal to win a war of attrition. Because right now Israel has suffered more damage in the last 5 days from this war than it did in the previous 75 years of existence.
It's being dismantled. It's being dismantled, taken to pieces. Let me ask you this. If the U.S. would make the foolish decision to attack Iran, what are kind of some of the things that you would see that would likely happen? You know, the Houthis have said we'll close the Red Sea. I think the Straits of Hormuz being done is the very first thing. But what are some of the things that you can see that would result?
Well, first, the possible loss of a B-2, 1 or 2 over Iran. There's a lot of misinformation again being put out about Israel's planes controlling the skies. We haven't seen any pictures of it. You know, there were pictures from the first day, but none subsequently to that. So we don't know how many of these bombs are being dropped are actually bombs, or they're drones dropping an explosive charge. But so you get some U.S. aircraft shot down. Iran is reluctant to close the Straits of Hormuz and lock everybody up in the Persian Gulf because it's on good relationships with Saudi Arabia.
Good point.
So it doesn't want to necessarily rock that boat. But I do think there's a U.S. naval base in Bahrain that'll be hit. Any U.S. combat aircraft that have flown out of, say, Saudi Arabia, and it's a U.S. controlled base, then I can see Iran hitting that. They don't mind hitting a target with Americans. They don't want to kill Saudis, but they will have no compunction about hurting America. The possibility that the oil does get shut down, that is, it's got a lot of people worried about that. Will Russia and China get involved? I think they will. We learned yesterday, according to Vladimir Putin and later Sergei Lavrov, that when Iran and Russia had negotiated that security treaty in January, signed on January 17th, it was Iran, not Russia, that refused to make it a defense pact, a mutual defense pact. So they found some weasel language to, leave that door open. And the reason Iran insisted upon that is Iran still held hope that it would be welcomed back into the Western world with a slap on the back and, forget about those sanctions. You're our great buddy again. And they wanted to leave open that possibility. They didn't want to alienate. They knew that if they signed an agreement like North Korea has with Russia, it could possibly alienate and make them permanent enemies of Washington. So, this is a case where the peace crowd in Iran may have just screwed themselves.
How, when you see, and that's the next thing, getting involved. Number one, I think Iran, to some extent, could defend themselves quite ably. I think the United States attacking Iran would get a punch that they wouldn't be prepared for. I tend to think that a lot of things, for instance, Iran could very well be saying, and this is what we've heard out of Iran. We knew Israel. We're not worried about them. They're small. Our preparation was always for the U.S. getting involved. We always felt if the flea bites us, we can handle that. We'd be ready for the big guy. What happens if the U.S. says, okay, we're going in, and you find out that they got a bunch of air defense systems, that the good stuff, they've been sitting waiting for you. You know what I mean? That when you attack them, all their best stuff, they've been sitting aside. And they let your planes come in, and now S-300, 400, all this stuff's turning on everywhere. And they let your plane, these big friggin' planes, get an hour in the Iranian airspace, and they just shoot everything down. You know what I mean? And it's just like they have been laying and waiting for this for months. You don't know what kind of a plan the spider has when you go into its lair. And it's a possibility that, we're talking about Russia and China, get involved, that the U.S. goes in there and they get their nose bloody bad. I suspect that. I suspect
Yeah. No, I think that's a reasonable, very reasonable assumption. And, as you know, from even, with your prior life in police work, I don't care how good your plan is. Plans last until like the first shot, and then all of a sudden you got to make some new plans up on the fly. What is clear right now is that Iran has moved some of its more sophisticated air defense systems back out of the range of Israeli aircraft. They very well could be lying low, preparing to, if you will, ambush any B-2s that come in to attack them. When you look at the record of how many bombs have been launched over the last 5 days, it's not an insignificant number, but it's not, it matches, doesn't even begin to match what Russia's doing to Ukraine. And the advantage now that Iran has over Israel is Iran is this big fat guy. And I don't know if you've ever punched a big fat guy, but you know what? It is not quite the same as punching some skinny little guy, because that muscle or fat mass, whatever you want to call it, is a little difficult to penetrate and can even hurt your wrist. Little guy, skinny guy, you can whoop them easy. So I think Iran's hanging back now, and they're launching enough missiles. Some of them have been old, really old missiles, getting them out of their stockpile to see if it can deplete Israeli air defense. The other thing I'm hearing, though, and I was told that General Mike Flynn is telling people in the Trump administration that Iran only has like 300 missiles, maybe 3,000 missiles. And I was saying, guys, look, Iran's been building these underground tunnels for more than 20 years. And when they manufacture underground, they don't then bring the missiles immediately above ground, parade them around, say, here's how many we have. Because the United States is always taking pictures, trying to count, let's see if you can actually count what's there. So if all that missile components have been produced for 20 years and it's underground, we could be looking at tens of thousands, not just less than 1,000.
I suspect tens of thousands. And here's the bottom line: the first rule of conflict: never underestimate your adversary. If it's me and they say, how many missiles does Iran have? I'd say we got to assume they got 1 million. I'd say if we're going against them, we must assume that they have 1 million, that they have an infinite supply, and they can never stop firing them. That has to be the assumption, and that's what we got to game for. Because if you game for that they only got 10 and they got 12, the last 2 are going to knock the hell out of you and knock you out, and they're going to be a knockout punch. So you got to. So again, it is this concept of saying, let's come up with the best case scenario that works for us. That if that were true, it'd be great.
Yeah.
And then if it ain't true, it ain't going to be great. So I don't know. I'm with you, Larry. Let me ask you this one last thing before we go. How does this whole thing, you've been to Russia, you've talked to very high-ranking people, you have been, as have I, been covering this Ukraine debacle for I don't know how long. Put those two together. This is happening now. Of course, Zelensky's over there like, oh crap! I'm as my dad would say, I'm sucking high and tit to Israel for sure. Ukraine's done.
Yeah.
They're done. They're going to be forgotten. There's like, we're through with you. Go on. Your thoughts on how this affects the Ukrainian and people have forgot to watch. The Russians have been pounding the hell out of them for the last week. But anyway, Ukraine.
Zelensky's sort of like that girl in high school that slept with everybody in the high school, and all of a sudden finds out that nobody wants to date her.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to date Zelensky anymore. He got, when he attended the G7 in Canada a couple of days back, they treated him like he had a case of bubonic fever. Keep an eye, stay away from me, man. The only one who was hugging it out with him was Keir Starmer. Okay. Yeah, this, I think, to his credit, the head of Ukrainian's military intelligence unit, Budanov, who's reportedly got good ties with the CIA, he predicted that unless there was a significant improvement in aid, more money, and in manpower, by the end of that, Ukraine would be hard pressed to stay afloat by the end of June. So we're coming up on the end of June here in another week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Very, very well could be that Budanov is right. It may not be the end of June. It could be, but end of summer, definitely.
And the Russians don't seem to be in any hurry. They don't seem to be in a hurry. They're just doing what they do. They're taking their time, just chipping away.
Yeah. In fact, I asked that of, I interviewed and it's posted at Countercurrents, an interview with General Evgeny Buzinski. Buzinski was the equivalent of the Defense Intelligence Agency chief. And great guy. And I asked him specifically, like, man, why hasn't Russia blown up all the bridges over the Dnieper River and cut the Ukrainian army off? And initially he laughed and goes, I've been asking that myself. But then we talked it through and reasoned it out. At least for the first 2 years of the war, Russia didn't want to if they would have blown those bridges, it would have cut off the bulk of Ukraine's army, left it intact.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Instead, keeping the bridges open, they're coming across, Russia's killing them. And he said, look, our goal is not to see how many of our soldiers we can get killed. So that's why we're doing slow advances. We're doing a lot of artillery, a lot of drones, so that when our troops do advance, the risk of being killed or wounded is reduced. And so he says, that's slowing us up? Absolutely. He says, but that's the price we want to pay right now. We don't want to pay it in blood. We'll pay it in time. And I thought, that makes sense. And they now may be reaching a period where those, in fact, if you want to mark the beginning of the end of this conflict, when Russia starts blowing the bridges over the Dnieper, that's the time that Dandy Don Meredith needs to be resurrected from the grave, just saying the party's over.
I've predicted for a long time, for quite a while. I said because it's so obvious. The Ukrainians are dug in all of these areas, Severodonetsk, and all of these things. And once the Russians come in and that front line collapse, those guys are going to be out of there, and they're going to be heading for the river, trying to cross those bridges. And my thing is this: when they get to the bridges, across the bridges, that's when they'll be blown. There won't be no bridges left. They will be roused up out of all of those entrenchments and all of that. That's going to collapse. And when that collapses, they're heading for the bridges because they want to cross and get into Western Ukraine. And when they get to the bridges, there ain't going to be no bridges, and Russia will wipe them all out. They will wipe every single one of them out. Because you know what they do? They don't want to fight that army later. And it's a sad and unfortunate thing. That's the situation you put yourself in militarily when you fight Russia. Sooner or later, they're going to create a cauldron, and you're going to get cooked. Larry Johnson, let's, but not least, everybody, let's forget, and this is very important before we go. This is absolutely critical. You want to keep your eye on what's going on. You want to know what the heck's going on out there. Sonar21.com. That's Larry's website. Go there, subscribe, support, all that stuff. Share sonar21.com on all your social media platforms. That is critical. Follow me on Rockfin and Rumble and all that kind of crap. And if you can afford to donate, that's fine. If not, just follow me on everything. And of course, I got my P.O. box there. If you want to send me snail mail, feel free to do that. Larry, thanks a lot. And I certainly appreciate all the hard work you're doing.
Hey, thank you, man. But what a conversation. That was more than an hour, man. That flew by.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, man. I feel, I've said it before we started, I'll tell everybody, I feel like Trump's getting a lot of pressure, and all of the people out here who are in alternative media, who are having conversations, there's people watching, there's people learning. I think that is helping the pressure on Trump and other politicians. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. And sonar21.com, that's where you guys got to go. Don't forget that. We're out.